Hello there, I'm Sconchulus, and this is TEPPEN Deck Teck, where I present to you decks that are fun, strong, or interesting. Today we are playing a deck that slows the game to a crawl with devastating death effects, which will allow us to grind out and mill ourselves to 0 cards for 2 extremely powerful graveyard payoffs. To get us there, we have our death units, which form a powerful suite of destruction. Osric on his own keeps Change Form and Storm Owl in check, while our most iconic unit, Yugioh, casts a wide net over anything powerful our opponent could play. Once these guys are on the field, they are very difficult for our opponent to clear without punishing themselves by their death effects. Depending on the situation, these can heavily restrict our opponent and force them to play suboptimally just to get out of it. And we can set up this situation consistently using our hero art. The most powerful thing you can do with Dark Invitation is set up 2-for-1s, where your hero art destroys one unit and the inevitable death of our unit will take out another. But you shouldn't always tunnel vision the big plays. In most cases, you should hero art Osric whenever you have a chance, but in some matchups, saving it for that one big destroy with Yugioh will make all the difference. Recognizing when you can pop off and when you need to be patient is the big skill of this deck. Next we have Bull Charger, which is the card that gives our deck gas. Charger is a bit awkward to play from hand, so we only have 2, but they are necessary to make this deck scary. Anytime this effect successfully procs, our opponent will be in trouble. You can even win on the spot if it goes to Yugioh. Unfortunately, if it doesn't go to anything, this card is a bit of a dud, so playing it with a revive is usually necessary. You can always hero art Bull Charger when they're the only unit to make a 6/10, maybe block a 6 health unit, then charge up for another spirit, but that's pretty risky. I would only hero art Bull Charger if you know you're ahead. Our last units are Marcellus, which ensures we can always survive, even once Dagger rotates, and that we can always close out the game, even if we don't draw our revives. Their death effect is easily the most fun in the deck. And finally, the dreaded Genma King Fortinbras. If his effect activates a single time, he already pays for himself, very kingly, and the potential to trigger again and again after that makes him a nightmare. You can set him up just by blocking, or by having a destroy ready in hand, and from there he is the most important unit on the field. If our opponent can't deal with him without letting things die, Fortinbras will spiral value until they drown in it. Just remember that he can empty your graveyard, which shouldn't be a problem since we can set him up with our self-mill. If you've seen the previous video on Ouroboros, you should already know how these cards work. At 14 cards or less in death, Abyss of Deck is the cheapest revive ever printed, with no MP restrictions, and is doubly useful with our death effects, while Storm of Death, I've come to realize, is even stronger once you mill everything. Abyss will only give you 1 unit back, but Storm will give you 3. This much sudden value, when your opponent thinks you're finally out of cards, is a win condition all on its own. If you draw this after milling below 14, always try to save it. Poison Gas Belt is our last mill card, which is just here to set up the other 2. It's a great turn 1 play to cycle, but once you're below 14 cards, I would do everything you can to avoid playing any more mill cards, and instead play as slow as necessary to draw your remaining power cards, specifically Goddess Dagger and Brothers Reunited. Goddess Dagger speaks for itself. Healing half your life and reviving a big unit naturally fits the game plan in a slow, graveyard-focused deck, while Brothers Reunited is how we put on the pressure. Pulling 2 units at once gives us twice the chance to summon the exact unit we need, and leaves our opponent with a lot to deal with. You can set this card up early with a few mills, but I would advise trying to play a unit from hand into the graveyard as well, so you know that you won't whiff. Brothers Reunited is very difficult to deal with, and along with Dagger, will be a huge loss to rotation. Thankfully there are numerous replacements. Nakarkos will do the best impression of Brothers, while being 1 MP cheaper even, and being busted if shuffled back by Storm of Death. but you can't use it early game. Guildenstern is another good option, but we're not playing him here to avoid milling more actions and revenge units. Lastly, Genma Trump Card and Sublime Sacrifice are two more generic revives to fill the slot, but they aren't quite as impactful. Brothers Reunited really is as good as it gets. Last of all, we have a couple tech cards. Dark Condemnation is a perfect cycle, and the ideal way to make Osric and Juju equal hero art, while also dealing with Hinoa and Storm Owl. Murderous Spikes is another out to Storm Owl and the cheapest destroy in the game, while Genma Castle Footsteps will let us dodge steals, which we really need to do to keep our graveyard set up. Keep in mind, if you use this on Bull Charger when they're the only one there, the buff will go to nothing. And last of all, we have Titanic Gatekeeper to cover any last blind spots. Here's the deck QR for you, and with all that said, let's get into it. Game 1, we are up against one of our easiest matchups, Raging Demon, which almost no other deck can say. Hopefully, this will be a perfect opportunity to show off the power of the Genma King. We have a unique advantage against RD, being that two of their best tools, Chainsaw Ganado and Dark Condemnation, just don't work on us. Our opponent will start off a zombie, and we will play Osric in front of them to defeat the zombie, but they ascend Seth, which will let them defeat our Osric, but Osric takes Seth in the process. We'll play Jet down Juju Jorma, and our opponent will activate Dark Condemnation, which lets us use Storm of Death for free, and our opponent will use another Dark Condemnation to cycle. They play down a Revenge Zombie to block Juju Dorma, and they will play down Liquor, which will defeat Juju Dorma, but it gives us the perfect opportunity to go for the Genma King Fortinbras that we've set up. Now, all of their ascends will give us massive value. They attempt to destroy Bull Charger, but that is the wrong play, and we take game 1. Game 2, we are up against easily our worst matchup, Morrigan, Shadowblade, Faith Steel. Hopefully they don't take everything from us. We have a very small number of units, so losing a single one to their steals is devastating for getting our revives online, particularly Brothers Reunited. We'll start off with Poison Gas Belt to hopefully mill around that downside, and our opponent will play Josie Kuroda. We'll activate Dark Condemnation to try and draw into something else, at least build some hero art, and we find Murderous Spikes, which will allow us to defeat their Kuroda without committing. We'll play down our Juju Dharma, which is now almost in hero art range, and our opponent will use Natural Fanatic. We could use our Storm of Death, but it seems better to save it, so we'll use Corrosion, and our opponent responds to that with Cornered Prey on our Juju Dharma. Now they can't play any of their buffed up Faith units from their hand, but they are able to easily get around that using Aid to Domination. We'll use Storm of Death at this point to hopefully mill something into our graveyard so we can still use our Storm of Death and Brothers Reunited. We'll play down Osric to hopefully get something in the graveyard for those, but our opponent will not let us. They have the Brainwashed, which will also allow them to start playing their Faith units. We are finally at the threshold for Abyss, and hopefully we've got some setup, but it doesn't even matter at this point because our opponent still has the negate for us. They will take our Osric to their side of the field, but we thankfully at this point do have 2 hero arts ready, which will allow us to defeat our own Osric. Our opponent plays down Ganado, one more unbuffed unit to buff up more in their hand, and they will use Holt, which will allow their Ganado to defeat our Juju Dorma, but they have something much worse in mind. We are completely being kept off of our graveyard, but hopefully we've milled something off of the 2 cards that we were able to activate, and we got Osric and Marcellus, which our opponent will defeat the bottom one efficiently with their hero art. Thankfully we are healed by 4 in the process. Our opponent's Osric will defeat our Juju Dorma, and our opponent will play down another Josie Kuroda. At this point we will activate our second Brothers Reunited, and our opponent responds with Natural Fanatic, which will allow us to use our first Abyss of Death, filling our field up to 3 units. We can now use our hero art on Marcellus to heal back to 30, and our opponent plays down their Hope of the Brood Ryu and uses the damage effect of that and their Stormblade to clear our field. We will attempt to use Genma Castle Footsteps with Juju Dorma still at 6, so we are playing around the potential Scrap Manipulator, and we summon our Revenge Marcellus from the deck. Unfortunately, he is down to 4 MP, which makes him a target for Rite of Mind Control, returning him to the hand. And now he cannot have his revenge activated a second time. Our opponent plays down Ganado, followed by Evil Guardian Saddler, which steals our Genma King Fortinbras. It was the best play we had, and we can follow that up with Osric to defeat their Ganado, and hopefully trade out with their Saddler, but they will use their Shadow Blade to keep us from doing even that. They play down the Juju Dorma that they stole from us, and we will use Marcellus and our Hero Art on him to heal back as much as we can and trade out with our own Juju Dorma. Our opponent plays down another Ganado without any buffs, and we will activate Poison Gas Belt to try and cycle to find any more playable cards. And at this point, we have milled out entirely. It is time to bring on the Storm of Death. We have a considerable amount of gas still in the tank, but the game is down to the final minute, and by playing down Marcellus, we do play into Scrap Manipulator, which our opponent can steal and will be very hard for us to defeat. They negate our Destroy on Marcellus, and with that out of the way, if we defeat him, they heal considerably. They are able to defeat our Osric, which will defeat their Lilith. They heal back to 30. They were always going to heal back to 30. And we have no more heals except for our own Marcellus. We could potentially get back to 25. We will play down our Juju Dorma and defeat their Marcellus, bringing them back to 29. And they have the third Scrap Manipulator for our Juju Dorma, which we don't have any possible answers for. We have Goddess Dagger, but it was never coming up. Our opponent wins in time, 30-21. Game 3, we are up against what I can only call an even matchup. X Heart Tank, Storm Owl deck. And that's saying a lot, because this is undoubtedly the strongest deck this format. Hopefully, we've got what it takes to beat the top dog. We'll start things off with Osric, daring our opponent to play an owl, and they will not take that dare. They will play down 2 Parker Luciani. We will activate Storm of Death, and our opponent responds with Allies Treatment, which allows us to use Dark Condemnation, which should deal with one of their Lucianis. They then use their Village Rebuilds to buff up both of their Lucianis, and Allies Treatment also triggers Luciani. We are now finally in range of our Juju Dorma though, which will allow us to make quick work of both of them. Our opponent's field is now entirely cleared out, but they have a great answer to our field with Alligator. We need to get our Hero Art back online for Juju Dorma to deal with that, but at the moment our best play is Brothers Reunited. Our opponent will shield their Alligator in response and activate Ammo to buff them up even further. We do pull Juju Dorma, but our opponent had Disarm, which explains why they were not worried about the Juju Dorma we would pull. We respond to that with Dark Condemnation to cycle, and we're back on our Hero Art, but we need to find Juju Dorma to deal with their Alligator. They play down double Storm Owl, which is just barely not enough to defeat our Bull Charger. Since we have more than enough Hero Art to still have it when we Juju Dorma, we will use our Hero Art on Storm Owl, and our opponent will respond to that with another Village Rebuild. We can use Corruption to thankfully destroy one of their Storm Owls and save our Bull Charger. We will now activate our Abyss of Death, which summons Juju Dorma, and we are able to use another Abyss of Death, but we cannot defeat their Storm Owl with Juju Dorma. That's the big weakness of Juju, is she doesn't beat the strongest card, but we will play down our Osric and use our Hero Art, getting the win in Game 2, playing around Stay Close.
How did I do?
Here we are again, and this deck totally kicks butt, which is why I wish I'd gotten this out a little sooner. The deck should still be completely playable in Super Spooky Village format, just gotta swap out the 2 cards that you lost, but I teched it out for this format. The strength of this deck will really depend on what we need to tech against for the next meta. Osric and Juju should deal with most problems, but maybe they won't. It really depends. We'll have to see what the best deck of the next format is, and this deck should be able to adapt to it. As far as matchups go, you guys pretty much saw them all. The only one you didn't see, Red, is also in even matchup, Change Forms in even matchup, and Kiko Machines is super favored for us. All of our death effects destroy them. Overall, this was an extremely powerful deck to climb with this season. I got as high as 1950 points, but at that point I started seeing a lot of Shadowblade, which brought me down a bit more. This deck could be just as good next format, we'll have to see. As for the next episode, we're gonna be playing some super spooky village, which I'm hoping to have a pack opening for, and we'll have to see what I can come up with, what's strong, but I'm really looking forward to purple. Looks like it does just about everything, and black looks extremely cool with the big board wipes. Thank you guys for watching. Please like the video if you liked the video, subscribe if you subscribed. Once again, I'm Sconchulous, and I'll see you in the next one.